What's up, legends? And I hope you're all having a marvelous Meta Monday. Remember, not every Monday is meta, but only Mondays can be. Today we're starting a new mini-series called Legends of Ladder. Ladder, if you are unfamiliar, which if you're watching this channel, I'm not quite sure how you'd still be, but for those perhaps residing under the rock, Ladder is a monthly competition hosted on the wonderful umleague.net featuring a rotating roster of heroes and maps where everyone battles it out to be the champion, the absolute legend of the month, and just have some bragging rights. It's a really cool little format, probably one of my favorites, although I am a little bit biased because I help run it. I rigged the People's Champions poll, things like that. But I think it's really interesting to have like a small subsection of the roster, because it's at like 40 characters now. Only having like 10 to choose from each month makes an interesting little mini meta, and it's just a really fun time. Really easy to pick up and play with friends, play with strangers online from across the world, because it is a global phenomenon at this point. Anyways, Legends of Ladder, I will highlight individuals with individuals. I will highlight certain players that have like remarkable seasons. So for example, this is kind of like one of the greatest runs of all time, LittleExpressionlessAnimal in April of 2023. Let me start that over. Winter of Champions 2023 champion, LittleExpressionlessAnimal, went on an absolute tear in Season 14 of April of this year, where he won 14 straight games to claim the top spot and be the only legend of the season. An absolute show of dominance. Truly, Animal is establishing himself as one of the most dominant players in the game today. I really look forward to seeing how well he does in Summer of Legends of this year. But anyways, he is truly a legend of Ladder, and I thought I would kind of unpack his run and maybe see if we just learn something. Maybe talk about like how probable it was that this happened, and just showcase some greatness. So if there are any other legends you would like me to showcase, any individual remarkable seasons that people had, be sure to leave me a comment so I can make sure to check it out. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person that won that season. I just think most of the time it will be. But again, greatness needs to be recognized, and Animal, I'm glad I can recognize you today. So as we can see, the final standings for the season, Animal stands alone at the top, perfect 14-0 record. Let's talk about the games that he took to get here. Of course, I always get ahead of myself. The roster for this season, this was Teen Spirit's debut, so Miss Marvel, Cloak and Dagger, Squirrel Girl, all making their first appearance in the ladder, featuring kind of like a mid-tier supporting cast filling it out. We have Bruce Lee, Bullseye, Raptors, Robin Hood, certainly aren't making any waves competitively. Little Red and Genie, kind of getting to the upper echelon of mid-tier, and then Yanenga probably being the only high-tier fighter in this season. So it was really interesting kind of testing the Teen Spirit fighters against like the middle of the pack, and boy did they disappoint. Yeah, Teen Spirit is probably just one step above the Buffy set in terms of like competitive viability, although I think there are vastly more interesting things going on with these characters than with the Buffy set. So anyways, first game of Animal's run was Miss Marvel versus Robin Hood, which currently has diddly squat for stats on UM League. The one win that Miss Marvel has recorded is literally this game. So throw the stats out the window. I can say from personal experience, this actually is really rough for Miss Marvel. I played this versus aspiring Camilla Khan main Pomadepin, and kind of wrecked him as Robin Hood twice. First of all, this particular matchup, was played on Navy Pier, which is a notoriously horrible map for the Miss Marvel, which I'm sure Animal made as much of an attempt to negate as he possibly could. But despite things not really looking good for Robin Hood on paper, Miss Marvel's start of turn ability hop kind of negates Robin Hood's after combat hop, and things like Snark and Wily Fighting don't really go off that often versus Miss Marvel because she often isn't attacking from right next to you. I just think Robin Hood has enough pressure and enough damage to just kind of whittle away at Miss Marvel's health because she's pretty squishy, usually blocks for like 3, and oh boy, the highway robbery mind games can be a little tricky. But Animal actually was able to pull this off. The 4s that draw cards are really good against the Outlaws because the Outlaws can't block for 4, so they'll always die, and then they won't be in your zone anymore. So that's a great way to draw cards and keep up pressure. And of course, if you actually like land the big boost card on Robin Hood, that can be a lot of damage. And Friends and Family, very useful for kind of countering the pressure that Robin Hood puts on. But of course, if it's in your hand, it's going to get ambushed because why wouldn't it? And this was actually a pretty close game. Animal only made it out with 2 health. And I think this was probably the closest thing he had to an upset his entire run. Games 2 and 7 were my favorite character, Bullseye, against Yanenga. And this is a pretty Bullseye favored matchup. Just Yanenga not having any cancels means Bullseye's 2s, 3s, and 4s are all really good. When I say that, I mean for my next trick, I never miss. Whatever the 2 is that becomes a 6, and World's Greatest Assassin. There's so many card names floating around my head, I can't keep them all straight. But yeah, just all those cards are really good. Bullseye has a lot of damage output, especially when it's not being canceled, and he has enough draw to make Yanenga's lack of draw a real problem for her. I think Yanenga's only hope in this matchup is just getting enough auto damage off with Point Blanks and Stallion Charge, and then just being able to counter pressure Bullseye, but she has to survive that, which can be very hard. And the map, one of these maps was Memorial, which I think is pretty good for Yanenga because of all the jaw spots, but there's still an ultimate Bullseye God spot on that map. And the other map this was played on was Raptor Paddock, which is probably one of the best, at least it's probably the most consistent Bullseye map just because of all the spots, and it's a pretty good anti-range map in terms of the tan and yellow zones on the side that kind of make ranged fighters have to come into melee range to hit, which doesn't really matter in this matchup because Bullseye's ranged, but it just means Yanenga probably has to boost her maneuver if she wants to actually get attacks in. And yeah, Bullseye went first in both of these games and pretty solidly took down the Yanenga each time, winning by 8 health and 12 health in both of those games. So yeah, Animal got the job done with this matchup. Not really too surprising. Game 3, Squirrel Girl, who is pretty awful. Again, the stats don't really mean anything since there's only 2 plays, but I think this is another example of a hero that is just very squishy and very immobile, which Bullseye loves squishy and immobile targets. And if he ever wants to win a combat, he can usually just attack a squirrel. And Ricochet is a card. So yeah, I think this should be pretty Bullseye favored. Yeah. This was played on King Solomon's Mine, which I think is actually like not a great Bullseye map just because it makes the opponent able to reach him a little bit easier. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not quite sure if there's a Bullseye spot on that map because I haven't really played on it that often, but Bullseye was still able to win by 8-0. So yeah, let's go Bullseye, woo-woo! And the bulk of Animal season, 6 of the 14 games, were this matchup right here. Little Red versus Cloak and Dagger. So Animal is a nasty Little Red player. Probably up there with the likes of Darkblade and Pomadepin and Bug Hunter as just like iconic Little Red. He showcased how good he was with this character in the Winter of Champions finals This was the closeout game 3 against Idokud's Bigfoot, and he played on King Solomon's Mine. That's probably his go-to with this character. As we can see, he played on it, I think, 4 times in this matchup. He went second in all of those, so that would indicate to me that he did, in fact, choose the map. And he was pretty dominant in this matchup. So I have speculated about this matchup with the aforementioned Palm, and boy was I wrong. I thought Cloak and Dagger would be able to pressure and hit over Little Red's kind of mediocre defenses, just force a bunch of discards, mess up the basket, gain a bunch of actions, perhaps catch Little Red with the wrong symbols, but I think Little Red just has too much auto damage. We've seen Cloak and Dagger's biggest weakness is that once one of them is defeated, the other will have a really hard time closing out the game. And Little Red is actually really good at dealing like 8 damage. Between the mouths, the paths, the once upon a times, you basically need like 3 of those cards, and then one of the enemy fighters is just dead. Huntsman also hitty hard. Huntsman hits pretty hard, and I think if Little Red is actually able to utilize like Wolf Skin to like draw, she'll just have the cards she needs when she needs them and be able to win. So yeah, these were not too far away from being close matchups, but the health total that Little Red had at the end of these were 7, 2, 11, 3, 3, 2. So yeah, they were close games, but I'd be interested to know if the games were actually as close as the health would suggest. But yeah, around 20 plays, Little Red has won about 75% of them. So that's like 3 out of 4. That's pretty good. Of course, we're like double dipping here. We're counting these 6 games, but like I just using the stats to kind of show the basic trend. It's not the end all be all defining answer. So yeah, Animals Little Red, pretty disgusting. And when I actually told Animal over Twitch that I was like making a video about him, he was like, "Oh!" And when I asked him like how he was successful, he said, "Just farming Little Red Cloak and Dagger matchups on Solomon's." Which actually I think Solomon's is like a horrible Cloak and Dagger map, just because the secret passages make it really easy for the enemy to run away, and also there's that library spot, which just means that Cloak and Dagger can't both be adjacent to the opposing fighter, which is not good, and also a library spot is really good for Little Red. So yeah, makes sense why he likes that map so much. Game 6 was Genie versus the Raptors, which is a little bit closer than it would appear, just because Genie has the card draw to withstand the Raptors' aggression, but not the health. So it kind of comes down to who can kill who first. And I think if I had to pick a side, I personally would probably go with Genie. Although if I got like map and position, I'd probably want to play Raptors. This game was played on King Solomon's Mine with Genie going second, which means LittleExpressionlessAnimal most likely picked that map, which is a really good Genie map, and it's pretty bad for Raptors, mostly just because once Genie can like get out of the pin that he'll inevitably be put in on the first turn, he can just hop around the secret passages and make it really hard for the Raptors to actually get ability damage on him. And I would assume that's how this game played out. Although Animal just might have King Solomon's Mine be like a comfort map pick for him. And I think it worked out here, especially because the Genie is really, really good on that map. So yeah. Next game, game number 8, was Little Red versus Miss Marvel. And this... oh boy. The only recorded plays of this matchup were during this season, in which Little Red won 10 out of 10 times, which, oh boy. Again, I think it's just a case of Miss Marvel being really squishy and Little Red having enough auto damage via effects to just send Kamala home with an ass whooping. Yeah, this one does not seem fun, although I'd be interested in trying it out just once to see if Miss Marvel like has a chance at all. And you guessed it, this was played on King Solomon's Mine. Game 9 was a really fun one, Bruce Lee versus Yanenga. This matchup is very close to even, despite it seeming like it would be Bruce favored. Obviously, Yanenga not having cancels means that Bruce's Jeets will just go off. 1-inch punch is really, really good against the archers. And Bruce has card draw to keep up aggression. Yanenga, however, just has auto damage to kind of make Bruce's life a little shorter than he would like it. Although Yanenga's attacks being all relatively low value means Bruce can safely play waters. But again, I think it just comes down to Bruce's health not being very good. He has to win fast, which can kind of be tough because Yanenga can be very, very tanky at times. This was played on Raptor Paddock with Animal's Choice, which I think makes sense because that's a pretty good anti-Yanenga map. And it was really close. Bruce only got away with 3 health, and this personally is like one of my favorite matchups to play. I played it against Unmatched in the quarterfinals of Summer of Legends last year, and all right, I'll be honest, I kind of like smacked Yanenga in that game, but I could very easily see it going the other way. Whenever I get a chance to throw like a shot at the Edwards, I always have to, just because I got beef with that family, except Declan. And the last game we're going to talk about is Little Red versus Bullseye, which, again, as a Bullseye main, I can tell you, this is a horrible, horrible matchup for Bullseye. Again, Little Red just has enough auto damage to just make Bullseye's health go bye-bye. The Huntsman attacks are guaranteed 2 damage, sometimes 3, and you're left with this awful conundrum of either trying to rush Little Red down and hope that she doesn't draw Huntsman healing, or you just gun down Huntsman real quick and then have to go through Little Red, which is just a lot of health in general. So yeah, Little Red pretty much dominates this matchup, and if I told you Animal had map pick, where would you think he sent this? Yep, King Solomon's Mine, which is great for Little Red and not so great for Bullseye. And yeah, so that is the streak. It's pretty magnificent when you look at it, and I think it is absolutely incredible when you think about it. He played 14 games in a row over the course of like 10 days with like a bunch of different fighters, pretty much just grinding Little Red, getting some really good map picks, just all around. Just he knew what he was doing this season, and it showed because he absolutely dominated and took home that legend crown trophy thing. So yeah, all in all, just the probability of him winning all the games that he did in a row, very, very, very low. An amazing health differential as well, and just absolutely incredible. I don't think there is any other legend I could have started out the Legend of Ladder season with. I tip my hat to you, Animal. Really good job, and I am glad I could showcase it here. So if there are any other seasons you want me to highlight, any other individuals, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of Animal's run, what you think could have been done to stop him, if anything. And yeah, enjoy the glorious Gloomhaven rat that is his profile picture, and hopefully he can leave a comment cluing us in on some of the gaps that I had to fill with my own intuition. And yeah, so that is Legends of Ladder. Happy Meta Monday. Behave, listen to your parents, hydrate. Well, let's take a little hydration break right now. Oh, that's good water. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. And as always, like, subscribe, and yeet!